The 2022 Union Budget presented by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman today has been described as a blueprint for the next 25 years, called Amrit Kal. By then, India would have reached 100 years of independence. Grand plans have been announced that are supposed to take India into the next era of development, although the specifics are quite vague. The common man has been left with little as they reel under unemployment and inflation. No relief has been given on the income tax front, something that was highly expected of this budget in the wake of the pandemic. Industries and startups have been given a boost with the hope that they will generate around 60 lakh employment opportunities. The focus, though, is on Atmanirbhar development. This includes encouragement of local industries in the defense sector. Another priority of this budget has been the extensive digitization across the country, whether it is for citizen-centric services or education for children, with special focus on financial transactions and access to the poorest and marginalized sections of the society. But the major highlights of the budget are: 1. LIC is going public. This is expected soon as the government looks to mop up revenues through divestment of the insurance giant. 2. 5G spectrum auction. The government is planning to get this done within the next fiscal. But the big bang has been the foray into cryptocurrencies. A 30% tax will be levied on transfer of digital assets like cryptocurrencies, NFTs, etc. A 30% tax will be levied on transfer of digital assets like cryptocurrencies, NFTs, etc. Moreover, to not be left out of the race, the RBI will introduce its own cryptocurrency, basically a digital version of the rupee, which will be supported by blockchain technology.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. I'm Srinivasan. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented the Union Budget, as you just heard in the package, for the financial year 2022-23 this afternoon. Even in normal times, budget is a difficult document to comprehend. The ongoing pandemic has made the task doubly tough. In the next 2 hours or so, we'll try to understand the implication of the decisions announced today. As far as the big headlines are concerned, you saw in the package, but just recall some of them. The FM has made no changes in personal income tax. This would have surely disappointed a large swath of middle class. But luckily, the government has imposed no new taxes on them. So that's a good thing. As far as small mercies, I would say, as far as corporates are concerned, the budget has extended by a year the incentives for manufacturing and lowered corporate surcharge. It has, however, hit the millennials by imposing a 30% tax on virtual digital assets. One defining aspect of the budget is its commitment to allocate higher spends on creation of real assets. It has proposed a 25% hike on capital expenditure. This is expected to spur infrastructure spending and therefore provide more jobs and ensure overall growth of the economy. This seems to be the linchpin of the budget. If one were to look allocation sector-wise, education has got a fillip. It's about 18%. There are disappointments as well. On health, the hike is just about 1%. On agriculture, 2.5%. Rural development, 0.3%. And Manrega, the Rural Employment Guarantee Program, which actually really came to the aid of the migrant workers at the height of the pandemic, there is a deep cut. So what kind of budget is this? Coming out of a pandemic, one might have expected big spends to help revive the sectors such as travel, tourism, hotel industry, more support to MSMEs or micro and small enterprises, more spend for rural and urban poor, perhaps more money in the pockets of the middle class to spur consumption, which is much lower than pre-pandemic levels. So what's the overall direction of the budget? To understand this, I'm joined by a panel of experts. I begin with Praveen Chakravarti. He's a political analyst and chairman of Data Analytics Department of Congress Party. I have also with me to help me in understanding this two senior journalists, T.K. Arun, former edit page editor of the Economic Times, and Dakshina Murthy, my senior colleague at the Federal. I'm also joined by Punit Nicholas Yadav. He's my colleague based out of Delhi. So Praveen, Now, directionally, where is the budget heading? What's your take on the budget as a whole?
Sure. Good evening. Directionally, actually, in my view, the budget represents a fairly marked shift into what we economists would call a capital to labor shift. And I will explain what I mean by that. Essentially, the crux of the budget is they've taken out money from subsidies, food, fuel, fertilizer, and Narega, and put that into capital expenditure. Now, subsidies or welfare is what we would say directed at labor, at people. Capital expenditure is directed, as the name suggests, to capital. And the bet here that the finance minister has made is the conviction on trickle-down economics, which is if we spend this money in capital expenditure through infrastructure development, that will then lead to increased economic activity, which then leads to increased demand, output, and can then lead to jobs and incomes and livelihoods. So it's that chain. Now, and that's a very conventional economic premise, so I can't falter for that. The real question is the precarious nature or the timing of this big, bold shift. We must remember that as we speak today, even though we are out of we're at least partly out of the pandemic, we still have 5 crore people asking for Narega work. People ask for Narega only when they have nothing else to do. So 5 crore people asking for Narega work, which is at an all-time high. At this juncture, will this bet or a directional shift pay off in increased jobs and incomes is something that we have to see. But I must say, as an economist, it's a very justifiable premise on which this shift has been made, which is a very classical Keynesian economics. I joke saying before the budget started, I was going to do just one thing. I was going to count the number of times the finance minister says the word jobs in the budget speech. The finance minister said jobs 3 times in the budget speech. She said the word prime minister 5 times. To give you the context, when the American president delivers a State of the Union address over the last decade or so, they utter the word jobs 20 times in each State of the Union address. The British Chancellor utters the word jobs 15 times. It just gives you a sense for where our priorities are.
Yeah, but I have a question here. Subsidies per se, it's been bane of the economy in the past. Earlier budgets, I'm not talking of now, earlier, it was a part of the non-plan expenditure, subsidy, salaries, defense expenditure, interest payment, that took a whole chunk of the spend. Now, moving away from that regime, isn't that it's better that we go for more direct, money transfer and cut down subsidies, and it is better utilized in creating infrastructure, isn't it? So what's wrong in it?
Well, no. So they cut down subsidies, and you're arguing the tools for welfare. Yes, should it be subsidy? Should it be a direct cash transfer? I must remind all of you that after all, there was a proposal for a direct cash transfer program called Nyai in the Congress Party's 2019 campaign, which I helped co-write along with Mr. P. Chidambaram. So I completely kind of understand, and I am a believer in moving to a more efficient tool for welfare. But here, they've taken welfare money and put it into capital expenditure. So they've not moved tools, they've not changed tools, but they've cut down subsidies and moved into capital expenditure. And again, as an economist, like I said, it's perhaps justifiable, the thought behind. I first question the timing. Is the year of when we're just about coming out of the pandemic, when labor markets are just completely damaged and destroyed, livelihoods have been destroyed, is this the time to experiment on such a gamble?
Right. Right. TK, I'll come to you quickly. You understood his point. He's actually saying directionally this is not good. But where I was trying to draw a distinction between subsidy and, you know, uh, social welfare programs. Do you think actually they have cut that to finance capital expenditure? Is this trickle down theory? You think it would work, or if one has to see? What's your view?
Yeah, to my mind, it's not enough to just look at the capital expenditure. In any budget, you have to look at three things. Does it address immediate problems facing the economy? What is the total size of spending? And does the fiscal deficit create scope for excess demand and therefore inflation, which will hurt the poor particularly? Now, does it address the level of distress in the economy at the level of consumption and at the level of distress in the small and medium sector? Directly, it doesn't lead to that too much. At the same time, the government has stepped up not just capital expenditure, but the total size of the budget is nearly 16% of GDP. Traditionally, India has achieved some kind of fiscal correction by compressing overall expenditure. The initial years of the NDA government saw the budget shrink to 12.8, 13% of GDP. During the pandemic struck 2020-21, the total spending by the government went up to 17.7% of GDP. In the current year, they expect to be something like 16.5% of GDP. And even for the next year, they still aim to achieve total spending that will be some 15.8% of GDP. So that way, that is a pro-growth stimulus that total government spending would do for the economy. And the understanding that government needs to spend to crowd in investment by the private sector, to my mind, is absolutely solid. This is what everybody has been urging the government to do. And I'm happy that the government has dropped that 5 trillion kind of discourse that it has been championing so far, 5 trillion economy, and is focusing on some achievable things. At the same time, there are certain, stark omissions in the government scheme of things. How are you going to finance the massive Gati Shakti logistics and infrastructure scheme that you have dreamt of? Where is the debt market from which people can raise money to finance long gestation infrastructure projects? The government promised in 2019 to set up a credit guarantee enhancement corporation. 2 years later, or 3 years later, it is still not being implemented. So unless you get a thriving bond market going, you cannot really have large-scale investment in infrastructure, except by once again exposing a banking system to the kind of credit risk that the earlier investment spree in infrastructure subjected them to. So these are some issues that the government still has to address and hasn't addressed. And let me just say in passing, the government still claims that it has done a great thing by providing so much of minimum support price to farmers, while at the same time also maintaining in the introduction of the controversial farm bills and the farm laws that it passed, that you need to diversify crops away from the very same grains that you have a surplus of and which you actually need to discourage production.
Right.
So it is not taking an integrated, holistic view of the economy even now.
Okay, TK, I'll come back to that. I just want to go back to Praveen on that. Have you looked at sectorally what his allocations have been? For instance, as I mentioned earlier, the allocation for Manrega, there seems to be cut. One didn't go through the papers. I just cursorily looked at it. There's a massive cut. One was expecting that there would be an alternate Manrega, perhaps for the urban poor. Far from it, they are gone and slashed it. Similarly, the cut on health. Education seems to be, but last time education was cut by 10%. Perhaps this time there is an 18% hike. How do you look at these allocations, and do you think these, this kind of approach where everything is kind of the linchpin is capex, and then the trickle down? Do you have any example where this kind of thing would work?
No, which is why I call this directionally a shift away from labor to capital. Narega is a great example of that. Narega, everybody knows. Basically, what is the problem with Narega today? We don't have enough money to fund the Narega. People still want work. There is still demand. States have run out of money after 9 months. What was allocated for them for the full year, states have run out of money. And Narega is a right to work. So basically, when people ask work, you're obligated to provide. So it tells you that there is severe distress. And by assuming that Narega, you can get away with not increasing Narega allocation is somewhat puzzling, actually. And I'll tell you what is the other one that has actually been increased sectorally, in fact, dramatically. Some 2.5 times the Ministry for IT and Telecom, their budget allocation has gone up 2.5 times, and presumably for 5G rollout, right? So again, it represents that shift. You're shifting money away from what is generally directed at people and welfare to corporates and capital. Now, as an economist, I certainly worry about this, given where we are at the stage of the economy that we are in. In terms of other subsidies and welfare, and even some of the things that Arun spoke about, I think the borrowing part, I agree. I think there may be some crowding in effect because of government trying to stimulate demand, but I don't worry so much about the ability to borrow at this stage. And I'll give you a simple example. My larger concern is, will they even be able to spend the money in capital expenditure? Let's not forget that they allocated 30% more this year in capital expenditure, and they barely managed to meet that expenditure. Yeah. So now you have to spend 40% more next year. So will you even be able to spend that much? So if you're not able to spend and there's no trickle down and you've cut away welfare, isn't that a big gamble?
Yeah. So I think the last year they spent about capex 5.5 lakh crore, and actual spent was 6.3 lakh crore. I think.
No. That includes 50,000 crores for Air India disinvestment, so which is a one-time. So if you take that off, it's there in the budget papers in fine print as always. So if you take that off, they spent less than what was budgeted. I mean, small. They spent almost what exactly.
But my big question is that at the end of the day, all this should be headed towards creating some kind of job. Did it create any job last year? It didn't.
I'll give you the example. I've analyzed this. 400 top companies listed in the Bombay Stock Exchange. Their profits went up 39%. Their market value went up 150%. Guess what? Their total employees remained exactly the same. 54 lakh before, 54 lakh after. Right. So job creation, and to be fair, it's not just an India problem. It's a problem all over the world, where companies are getting more and more efficient in their use of capital. Productivity goes up. It doesn't create that many jobs, but it creates a huge problem for a country like ours.
Right. I would also quickly ask you to wear your political hat. What is it that there was the expectation that, with elections to Uttar Pradesh and 4 other states coming along, there would be some kind of populisms, and the budget would be constantly sprinkled with a lot of, goodies for almost all sections. That doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah, no, see, having analyzed elections and followed and been involved in it for a long time, I think it has almost zero correlation between what the schemes that get announced in the budget and its ability to influence voting behavior. But I will tell you what has been done with respect to, keeping elections in mind, the lack of raising of tax rates or new taxes. I think that is clearly driven by the 5 state elections that are coming up.
Yeah, but there are 2 other issues here. One is inflation. Inflation is certainly an issue, and consumption. I was just hearing senior executive HUL saying that, consumption, of course, we know that consumption has dropped really as compared to last year, but also the fact that the volumes have really dropped. So seems to be some kind of a rural distress there also. So either, the strategy could be different because end of the day, BJP is a smart party. Maybe they would have they kind of delinked budget from political campaigning?
Well, yes, that is, of course, let's not forget, 4 months after a budget was presented in 2019, unknown to even the finance minister, suddenly they announced a reduction in corporate tax rate one evening when she was in Goa chairing a GST council meeting, and suddenly, just 4 months after, I mean, it's almost unheard of, right? Reducing corporate tax rate. So to that extent, yes, and that was driven by a political compulsion. So to that extent, yes, there's a divorce. But the point about sorry, what was your other question?
No, I'm saying overall, have they delinked? That's one question.
Yeah.
So you seem to think that in a way they can take a call whenever
No, it's clearly they have delinked. But then the other thing I was going to say was inflation. I think you brought up inflation. And yes, consumption is low. I mean, again, for the first, not for the first time, but for the last few years, domestic two-wheeler sales have been declining.
Yeah.
So, which has never happened, that's a very classic kind of proxy for upward mobility when people graduate from cycles to motorcycles. And that's a very classic proxy for rural consumption strength. And that has been declining. I suspect inflation played a big role in when they were formulating the budget, because the more money you put into people's hands, what is the immediate impact? The immediate impact is on inflation. And hence, I suspect that, and this may be political compulsions given the state elections, because almost every politician who contests an election will tell you that there's nothing worse than an inflation when you're facing an election. So I suspect that was a major driver in also not trying to put more money into people's hands, either through welfare or through direct cash transfer.
Okay, quickly, I will now go to Puneet, our colleague from Delhi. What are you hearing, Puneet? I mean, some of these questions you heard, what is that opposition and other parties are saying? What is their overall take on the budget?
Well, I think as far as the reaction of the opposition parties is concerned, it's natural. You rarely have a budget presented by a government which is wholeheartedly welcomed by the entire opposition. So there are Mr. Rahul Gandhi's called it a zero-sum budget. Mr. Chidambaram just held a press conference and called it a completely capitalist budget. You've had similar reactions from the left parties, Mr. Sitaram Yechury calling it a complete capitalist budget, which has absolutely nothing for the common man, for the poor, and all that. But the point that you were making and discussing with Praveen at the moment with regard to elections, there was, yes, an expectation that given the 5 states that are going to polls and the condition of the BJP in these 5 states, there would be a major push for different kind of populist measures and huge allocations, perhaps for creation of jobs, for Narega, for the e-Shram initiative of the government, etc. None of which seems to have happened. I was speaking to one of the BJP MPs from Western UP, who said it almost looks like a budget that is aimed at punishing the farmers for not being cooperative. So there was this expectation with regard to fertilizer subsidy, which has become a major issue in Western UP and in Eastern UP. The lack of fertilizers, the black marketing of fertilizers, etc. There has been no change in that. In fact, I guess from if I've read the papers correct, Praveen may or Mr. Arun might want to correct me there, but there seems to be a decent cut in the fertilizer subsidy allocation.
There's a 30% cut.
Yeah, sorry?
30% cut from the revised estimate on fertilizer.
Yeah. And similarly, the allocation for loan waiver has been reduced from the previous year. You also have, as Mr. Chidambaram pointed out just a while back in his press conference, agriculture and allied services, the outlay has been cut there too. So there is, I don't think in the poll-bound states where especially Punjab and UP, where farmers have become a major problem for the BJP. This is a budget that is not going to get the government any kind of brownie points there. Yes, it may be good economics when you say, talk about trickle-down effect from, the increased thing on capex, etc. But the now and here aspect of the budget is not, the aspirations of the people, the immediate things with regard to job creation. In UP, Punjab, Uttarakhand, jobs is a major issue, which the budget simply does not address. I mean, Ms. Sitharaman said 60 lakh jobs to be created. These figures that are constantly thrown in the air, you had a while back, you had a minister from Uttar Pradesh who said, we've already given 2 crore jobs.
Right. Puneet, I'll come back to you. You see, we are joined by Mr. Kanaga Sabapathy. Let me quickly introduce. He's author and member of Indian Council for Social Science and Research. Welcome, Mr. Kanaga Sabapathy. I'll come to you in a minute. I have Dakshin waiting. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I'll go to Kanaga Sabapathy. Yeah, Dakshin.
For me, this fundamentally 2 things are very striking. One is, the fact that it's a slim budget in the sense that, I'm personally disappointed that nothing much has been done on health because, considering that we're going through this pandemic, one would have expected logically that there should be something done for the healthcare network and the infrastructure. It can't be a piecemeal kind of a response, which is what we have seen so far. And the other, also, as far as the states are concerned, I'm not very sure whether anything tangible has been done for the states because states have also undergone a lot of difficulties, and we have seen, for instance, the loans and the fact that the government offered loans and the states refused. So I feel that somewhere the budget is really lacking in substance.
Okay. TK, you want to ask anything to Praveen? So before I go to Mr. Kanaga Sabapathy.
See, in case we assume that the worst of the pandemic is over, the rest of the world is forecasting India to grow at around 9%. IMF forecast is 9%. India's own statistics office say 8 to 8.5%. If this normalization of the economy happens, you would expect the need for outlays on NREGA to come down. If your vaccination drive is over, you would have considerable saving on that count in the health budget, and therefore, even if there's only a marginal increase in the nominal outlay, the money disposable available to you to spend on substantial things would still be higher. And so, essentially, if you characterize this budget as something that gambles on growth for providing relief to distress, would you think that would be a correct kind of characterization?
Yeah, see, what is the crux of the issue today, economic issue today, which is livelihoods, incomes, right? Labor market is in utter distress, and Narega demand is a great proxy, two-wheeler sales is a great proxy. So I don't think anybody disputes that. Now, all this headline GDP of the fastest growing 8%, 9%, guess what has also been growing along with our GDP? Unemployment. We are very unique in that aspect. The problem in the Western economies today is the exact opposite, which is they have severe underemployment problem. They're not able to get people. we have the exact opposite problem. So it tells us very clearly that regardless of headline GDP growth or how many ever unicorns you may create or wherever the BSE Sensex goes, it's not translating into jobs and livelihoods. So if this was the case, then betting that, okay, demand for Narega will wean off because, you know, Omicron or the pandemic is over and we will be able to generate jobs all in the next, few months. Isn't that a big bet? Isn't that a bold gamble? And that's why I call it a gamble. I would have been not perfectly, but maybe I would have been okay with this sort of a focus and a shift, maybe next year, right, if we stabilize to this year.
Right. Quickly, I think this answer also kind of poses a question to Mr. Kanagaswamy. You can give your views and then kind of answer that, isn't this important, creation of job? And how is it going to come?
Thank you. I will touch that part during the course of my presentation. We all know that India is a unique economy. We have very strong fundamentals. Some of us who are involved in field studies for over the last 30 years, we observe that we have enormous strengths as an economic power. If you see the saving habits or the entrepreneurial abilities of our people, especially the upcountry areas, clusters, the kind of social capital that we have, and as a result of which the strengths of MSMEs, these are our unique strengths. And as a result, if you see India, the last 70 plus years, 70 years back at the time of independence, we were a very poor nation. But today, in spite of all difficulties that we discuss as academics and the experts from different fields, we are one of the largest economies, third largest economy in terms of PPP, and no doubt that we have the fastest growth rate in the world. So as a country, as an economy, we have enormous strengths. And I think from that point of view, this particular budget is very, very important, especially after the...
sorry, I'll interject here. Nobody denies the fact that we have one of the best, our country is uniquely, positioned. Nobody denies the fact that's a very bright future. And the savings rate has been one of the highest, but unfortunately, the savings rate is also under stress. The entrepreneur ability, nobody doubts. That's why so many unicorns have come. Yesterday, a survey said 551 in each district. Startups have come, all that is fine. But the point is, right now they are in distress. MSMEs are struggling. They need capital to, restart. See, starting a company perhaps is much easier than restarting a company. So is there anything you see in the budget for that? That's the crux of the whole thing.
Srinivasan, can I drop off because I have to go?
Sure. So 1 minute after that, you can give your concluding remark.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. Mr. Sabha, you want to answer this?
Praveen wants to come, or can I answer?
No, you can answer it. Or Praveen, if you're in a hurry, you can.
No, please go ahead.
Please go ahead.
You're very right. I come from Tamil Nadu. I'm from Coimbatore in an MSME sector. It is in a MSME region. It's true that the MSMEs have been facing very serious difficulties, particularly in the last 2 years. But it is also true that, we have picked up very fast, particularly if you take the western region of Tamil Nadu, or for that region, large part of Tamil Nadu, we have picked up. So now, the last, almost 1 year, maybe 7-8 months, our MSMEs are picking up. It is true that we still have some difficulties, but because of the one strength, then support by the government earlier, especially particularly this emergency credit line provided by the government to MSME sector. Now the sectors are growing up. We have been involved in studies continuously, and I can say that this region, which is one of the most important entrepreneurial regions of this country, has been picking up very fast. So there is no doubt, at least I have no doubt, that we will be able to come. So we don't have very serious difficulties. Of course, we still have some issues, but it is not true that we face enormous difficulty. It is not like that. If you take the most part of Tamil Nadu, we want people for work. We don't have people for work. So most of the labor come from the other states of India. So this is the position. It is true that MSMEs still have some problems, but it is also true, to a large extent, it is true that MSMEs are picking up and doing their best now. You will be happy to know that in the last 6 months, the performance of MSME centers in many of the places, in many of the clusters of Tamil Nadu, centers of Tamil Nadu are doing very well.
Right. Thank you. Quickly, you want to wrap up, Praveen?
Sure. So like I said, I think this budget this year, to me, it certainly seems like a big, bold gamble on growth, especially when it is well understood that the biggest problem is one of jobs, lives, and livelihoods. And also on the MSME sector, I do want to point out, Mr. Sabhabati, that it's not entirely accurate to say they're not suffering. The government's budget papers today says around 9,17,000 corporates filed returns. 99% of them accounted for less than 30% of profits. It's only the top 0.3% account for all of the profits. So there is very clear MSME misery that we can see in the government's own data. So the MSMEs are in a problem, labor markets are in a problem. So at this juncture, to gamble on growth is a big, bold gamble. And I actually sincerely hope that it works out for the nation's sake. And I must add that, I know both Mr. T.V. Somanathan, the Finance Secretary, and Anantha Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor. I've co-authored articles with them. So I know them very well as economists and their thought process. So I can understand where, maybe Anant was not involved, but certainly Mr. Somanathan would have been very detailed, very involved in the preparation of the budget. So, and that is why I think it's a risk that they've taken. It's a gamble that they've made. I hope it really works out for the sake of all of us. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you, TK. So you heard, Praveen, he says it's a gamble. But, let us look at some other sectors. For instance, the infrastructure pipeline, which they have set up in between, and then the auctions, which they wanted to do and raise funds. Let's take one example of railway. They wanted to start for about 150 rail lines, 400 stations. Those things haven't drawn any big, positive results. So as far as, non-tax revenue is concerned, do you think there is anything in the budget you see which is positive, which can help finance all the programs?
The non-tax revenue levels remain the same, more or less, from last year, the year before. There is no dramatic change.
Actually, there's no mention of disbursement in the budget speech at all. Yeah.
But the amount they have budgeted actually has come down.
Yeah.
They budgeted huge amounts for the current year. The realization was about half what they had budgeted. And they have more or less kept it that level for the next year as well, which is okay. They are not being great success at this investment. Now, I would like to make one point on how the MSMEs are doing. We have seen that exports have been growing at a steady clip over the last few months. And the world economy is also growing reasonably well. And if the world economy grows and India is able to increase its export, it must mean that our MSMEs are doing fairly okay. because a large part of our exports come from our small and medium enterprise sector. We also saw that for the last 3 months, capital imports and project imports have been growing at double-digit rates. So there is some kind of pickup in capital formation in the economy. So this also is something that augurs well for investment revival and growth in the economy. Where the government's plans for drawing in private sector investment will come short is the inability to instill confidence that the government will actually honor its commitment to the private sector. You think of a foreign fund that wants to put this money in India, and you see the picture of international arbitration awards being grossly trampled all over by the government. The complete lack of respect it shows the Singapore Arbitration Award in the case of the dispute between Amazon and Future. The way the Supreme Court has tried to scuttle the award in the case of the Devas deal. These are, and finally, I mean, although the government very reluctantly gave in to the double taxation dispute, the clear message that goes out is that India is not a very reliable partner when it comes to agreements being reached or being enforced thereafter. So these are things that the government will have to actually take into account. So one good feature of the budget this time is that the extra budgetary resources that the government has smuggled in the past, that is being sort of discontinued, at least in the current year's budget. But overall, the fact that you don't have a debt market, whatever infrastructure pipeline you might have, where is the money going to be mobilized to fund these projects? That is something that the government has to actually give an answer for. Unless you again want to force the banks to keep lending to these projects, and which might again create a bad loan problem for the banks.
Yeah. Quickly, let me introduce Professor Ram Kumar. He's a policy analyst and member of Kerala Planning Board and a faculty member at TIS, Mumbai, Tata Institute for Social Sciences. Ram Kumar, you heard what's your overall thing on the budget. I'm sure you also want to say something about the agriculture, because the budget says some big steps are being taken to ensure farmers' income.
Does it?
Ensure that, farmers' income rises.
Looks like I missed a part of the budget speech.
Okay.
Well, let me put it this way. Okay, I'll come to the agriculture point in a minute.
Yeah, surely you should answer at least later somewhere this direct cash transfer of 2.37 crore for MSP and those kinds of things. At least that you must have heard. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll come to all that. No problem. No, I mean, I am in some agreement with some of the points raised earlier. Nothing much to say, but I think the first problem that I had after listening to the budget was this. The world is looking at the post-COVID world very differently. Post-COVID economic sector very differently. The overall fiscal rules are being challenged even within the European Union. The role of the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, the relative weights are being challenged across the world. The very new ways in which economic strategies are being adopted to face a post-COVID world. So there is a lot of seriousness with respect to formulating a new strategy for the economy across the world. Now, I expected that the finance minister would at least have something on what India's economic strategy is for a post-COVID world. It was sorely missing in the budget speech. In the economic survey, if you see yesterday, there is a lot of talk about waterfalls and agiles and all that, but very little on what we actually have to do. In fact, the idea of agile policy gives away everything. In fact, you do as you see on a daily basis and don't plan for anything even for a year. That's a big problem for me, and I didn't see that in the budget is one big problem that I felt. The second is I'm not in agreement with those who say that the Indian economy is in some kind of a growth path. In fact, if you look at 2 years growth rates, -7.2 and then +9.4, if you base it at 100, an index, you are still at 101.5. Adding the two growth rates, minus and plus. So you're hardly grown in 2 years. That's one problem. The second problem is that there are huge problems with respect to the advance estimates that are being put out, because advance estimates largely rely on the formal sector. Even within formal sector, they rely on only those firms employing more than 20 workers under the Factory Act. So you basically simply do not consider the distress in the informal sector when you look at advance estimates. So they present a rosy picture to you, but I don't think they represent what is happening in the informal sector at all. There's an enormous amount of distress, particularly in the MSME sector there. Overall consumption, as the data show from the NSO, is not growing. Private consumption has particularly fallen. Agricultural incomes in real terms are under great stress. The IIP Consumer Durable Index is falling. Automobile sales, bank credit, all are in bad straits. So I don't quite see where this whole confidence is coming from with respect to the next year. I think next year is going to be hard, particularly because much of the pent-up demand is over. The growth that has to happen on a concrete basis. And what is that basis is what I'm worrying about. The question with respect to the budget is, how do you fiscally respond to this? I'm leaving monetary policy out. How do you fiscally respond to this kind of a situation where demand is under great stress? One viewpoint is that there is no problem with demand. The problem is actually with supply. We have supply constraints, and those are the real problems out there. If we actually fiscally expand in the presence of supply bottlenecks, you will simply have inflation and nothing else. That's one dominant view out there. They take examples from the West and argue different points out. But I do not think that's correct. India, we do have supply bottlenecks for sure. But it will be completely wrong to say that demand bottlenecks do not exist in the Indian context. With such high levels of unemployment, such extents of job loss, particularly in the MSME and informal sector, it would be completely wrong to say that there is no demand constraint in India at this point of time. So my point is, you need to fiscally respond. How does a budget fiscally respond? It has got tax revenues coming in, and it might help it to increase expenditures. But what have you done from 2017-18? One big chunk of your revenue, corporate income tax, you have cut. So that as a share of GDP, if corporate income tax was about 3.3% in 2017-18, today it is only about 2.5% of your GDP, despite the fact that private corporate profits have skyrocketed in the last year. Right? Your corporate income tax is still about 2.5% of the GDP, which is a shrinkage compared to 2017-18, regardless of the fact. You can control for the fact of lockdown and other things, but despite that, the fact is that as a share of GDP, you have shrunk. GST, the numbers put out are very rosy, but if you look at it as a share of the GDP, it contributed 3.1% of the GDP in 2018-19. It's only about 2.8% of the GDP in 21-22. So you don't quite see tax revenues growing remarkably in the last few years, and certainly so in the last 1 or 2 years. So you can rely on borrowing, or you can disinvest. There are two classic ways of doing it. Of course, you borrowed in 2021. Your fiscal deficit rose to 9.2% in 2021, but in 21-22 it fell to 6.8 as per the budgetary estimate, but 6.9 as per the revised estimate. But the point is, it's going to further fall to 6.4% by 22-23. So you're going to fiscally shrink your stance in the next year, and that is going to have an impact certainly at some level. That's my view. India needed to keep a substantially larger fiscal deficit and a liberal fiscal stance at this point of time, given the crisis that we have in the economy. That's my first point that I would like to raise. Now, the second point is that this high fiscal deficit that you have, even this fiscal deficit of 6.9 that you have, is not because you spent, but because your revenue shrank drastically. Your revenue shrank partly because you had a large sort of expectation that there would be disinvestment proceeds this year, which have not happened. So your disinvestment proceeds were lower this year, and it's going to be lower next year also, because if you look at the FRBM report that accompanies the budget, it will tell you that the economic conditions are very poor, valuations are very low, and as such, we do not expect disinvestment receipts to be high even in the next year. That's a very clear statement out there. To sell Air India, you had to pay 50,000 rupees. So basically, that has added to the fiscal deficit of this year, the present year. The present fiscal deficit is also high, not just because of the 50,000 given for Air India, but also because of another 60, 70,000 crore rupees you had to give additionally in terms of fertilizer subsidy, because international fertilizer prices are rising. So basically, you're not spent for the people in any way. There is some Air India 50,000 crore you're paid, and there is about 70,000 with respect to fertilizer subsidies that you're paid, which has kept your fiscal deficit at 6.9 this year. And a cut of 6.4 further from there will actually mean that a lot of essential expenditures will remain stagnant and will not rise. That is one big problem that I see for the next financial year.
Yeah. Let me go quickly ask one or two questions. I think TK would also maybe leaving at 6, but before that, just one, Mr. Kanagaswapati, you heard that as a percentage of GDP, basically the taxes aren't actually growing. That's what Ramkumar is saying. The finance minister today announced that in January, the collection of GST has been very good, 1,40,000 crores. As an absolute number and as a highest collection so far since its launch, it looks very good. But then wasn't when it was launched, 5 years ago, the expectations were far more that the states would get, and you are from Tamil Nadu, that states like Tamil Nadu would get more share out of the GST to fund the development program. Is it happening?
Yes, I'm from Tamil Nadu. I come from a family which is involved in these MSME activities. Before 2017, I'm not just an academician. I tell my, the background problem. Before GST was there, the MSME entrepreneurs had to undergo a lot of difficulties. For example, we are a producer state, Tamil Nadu. When we send our products, finished goods to, let us say, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, we had to face a lot of difficulties. That is the reason why GST was introduced. Of course, expectations were there. But over the last 4 or 5 years, I am also involved in some of the activities of MSME sectors. To a very large extent now, our difficulties have been satisfied to a great extent. So it is true that when a new system like GST is being introduced, you will have to face a lot of difficulties. Now the MSME sector is, by and large, is very happy, except in a few cases where still they have some problems. Otherwise, we are very happy. Now the government, for the 4th month in succession, they have been getting more than 1.30 lakh crores. Of course, January 22 is historic. It exceeded 1.40 lakhs. So from the MSME sector point of view, I think sector is by and large happy. Wherever there are issues in Coimbatore itself, Tamil Nadu itself, we had faced difficulties. Then we went to the government and the issues are sorted out. So by and large, now things have improved and we are very, very happy. As far as the MSME sector is concerned, you have to understand that for a long time, centers like Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, we have been urging the government to push for Make in India products. For example, I know for the last 10-15 years, our Coimbatore enterprises, we have been demanding. Hello?
Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
We have been demanding facility for defense sector. So for the first time, some 4 or 5 years back, 2016-17, now we got this. You may be knowing that we have we are beneficiaries of one of the 2 defense corridors, Coimbatore, Hosur, Salem, Trichy, Chennai, forms part of one corridor in Tamil Nadu. As a result, now our Codicia, which is the largest small-scale industry association in India, Codicia, now our people have promoted a separate SPV for this purpose. And as a result, now our entrepreneurs are supplying products to the defense industry. So some important developments are happening. And even in this budget today, now the finance minister has announced that 68% of defense procurement will be earmarked towards domestic industry. So we are beneficiaries of these schemes. And when I was mentioning earlier about this emergency credit line, because of which Tamil Nadu is one of the largest beneficiary. Now it is extended to up to March 2023. So we are all very happy. In spite of the problems of the last 2 years of Corona, now our MSME sector is coming up.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kanaswamy. Quickly, TK, you heard about the revenue issue. I'm still curious. What do you think about it? As a GST absolute number, 1.4 lakh crores looks absolutely fine. But you still need much more.
Yeah. See, India, along with the states in the center, collect only 17% of GDP as tax. This is opposed to 34% of GDP average for OECD as a whole, more than 50% for a country like France. So we need to collect much more tax as we go forward. And GST is actually the basic framework using which you can actually increase your tax collections, not only from indirect taxes, but also from direct taxes. GST gives you multiple audit trails, which you follow up diligently, and you analyze the data. You can capture any concealed income. You cannot actually conceal income. The value added by a company is revealed when you pay GST at a particular tax rate. You can estimate the value added, and the value added breaks down into return to income and return to capital, the gross profits plus wage and salaries. You cannot conceal this once you are fully within the GST framework. So if you analyze the data properly, you can increase not only your indirect tax collection, but also your direct tax collections. We haven't still reached the stage where we are good enough to analyze the data being thrown up by the GST system. So once we do that, we will be able to manage much more. Yes, to Professor Ramkumar's point, we projected on some 2.7% of GDP is your corporate tax collections in the current year, and slightly better next year. This is lower than what it was. But absolute growth in the corporate tax rate is still positive. It is not negative. We are not giving away tax, actually. We are still able to generate additional tax revenue. And India had 11.2% of GDP as tax collection by the center many years ago. And it has always been around 10.8%. And the only way to come out of that is not really by tinkering with the tax rates, but by analyzing the data thrown up by GST and then following those trails to find the concealed income that is evading tax.
Right. I think even GST as a regime is over 5 years now, and there must be some rehaul of that. I thought something on those terms would come in the budget. Of course, it hasn't.
Budget cannot, no. That the budget cannot. That is what the GST Council.
Yeah, I know. Some policy direction, I thought. Okay, yeah. Dakshin, you want to say something?
No, if I throw with the GST, I thought, I'll just ask something on agriculture. I was curious to know some.
Agriculture, Ramkumar, we're waiting for it.
Given that all the protests happened and the withdrawal happened, and then now again there has been a kind of a disappointment expressed by the schemes are the plan, the budget for agriculture. It sounds a little bizarre. When I was in fact wondering what this means. Railways to develop infrastructure for small farmers in 22-23. It looked a little iffy. Or overall, what do you think about this budget for agriculture?
I think there's very little on agriculture per se. It just looks like the Kisan struggle never happened prior to the budget. There are exactly 7 times the word agriculture appears in the whole budget. One of them is a section title. The second one is a list in the appendix. So exactly 5 times is the number of times the word agriculture appears in the budget. Two of these 5 are related to chemical-free natural farming. One is related to customs duty, and the last one is related to stubble burning. That's all about agriculture in this budget, right? Rest is all MSP payment, procurement, etc. is an everyday activity in the Department of Agriculture, right? You pay MSP to farmers through banks every year, right? But this government has a particular very interesting strategy. Something that you do every day morning. Suppose you get up in the morning, pick up a toothbrush and brush your teeth, right? That becomes an event for this government, regardless of the fact that you do it every day morning, right? So one day morning you brush your teeth doesn't mean that it's a historical event that you've brushed your teeth and everything is fine that fine morning, isn't it? That doesn't happen. So basically, MSP procurement all have risen, and of course in a lockdown year, there has been some improvement in procurement. As a result, more MSP payouts have happened. That's all there out there. There's no doubt about it. But the point is, these are all relief measures. Tomorrow, when agriculture comes back to normal, what is it that is expecting you expect in agriculture is the question. And here is where I feel this budget makes a very important error or mistake, which is that it goes completely against scientific opinion to introduce a system called natural farming, which has zero sanction in agricultural science, which is quackery in my view, which basically tries to replace chemical fertilizers with cow urine and cow dung, and basically around a 5-kilometer corridor on the sides of the Ganga, which gives it a Hindutva tinge as well, right? This is the strategy it has. Why has it done this? It is basically a Sri Lanka situation unraveling in India today. International prices of fertilizer have risen. So basically a fertilizer subsidy outgo is added to by about 75,000 crore this year, 49,000 crore in 49,000 crore in non-urea fertilizers and about 25,000 crore in urea fertilizers. That's the additional outgo that you had this year because of international rising prices. You want to reduce this fertilizer subsidy outgo. And in order to reduce the fertilizer subsidy outgo, you are telling farmers, don't put fertilizer. And the crisis that is going to happen because of this rather stupid and idiotic advice to the farmer is that every study out there shows that there will be 30% reduction in the productivity in agriculture if you do not put fertilizers. So basically, you're trying to reduce input costs by telling farmers not to put chemicals, but as a result, your yield is also going to fall, production is also going to fall, and the reduction in input cost is simply not going to translate to higher profit for the farmer because gross incomes are also going to fall. This is going to happen in agriculture. Sri Lanka has been in a great crisis because of Rajapakse's announcement to ban chemical fertilizers. I fear that something very close to that might happen in India if this scheme is actually going to work on the ground.
Okay, TK, quickly, if you heard his answer.
I just like to add one point. The economic survey made much of the need for crop diversification. Now, the very logic of bringing in the farm law was that India needs to end open-ended procurement of grain. We have mountains of grain that are rotting in the government stocks. So we need to produce less grain and produce more of the stuff that India is importing and of which India actually still has a lack, such as oil seeds, pulses, lentils, all these. Now, when the government gave up the farm laws under political pressure, it seems to have given up the economic logic which underlay the farm bills in the first place, that you need to move away from producing more of grain and producing more of the other things, which will also enhance farmers' incomes. And this budget completely failed to give a blueprint for any kind of constructive crop diversification. This is the only other point I want to make.
Right. Thank you, TK.
So,
now, quickly, we are joined by another guest, Sridhar. He's a senior journalist. Sridhar, what's your opening remark on the budget?
I was just looking at the so-called expansion in capital outlays, the 35% increase. Now, I was trying to look for the numbers and see, basically, it is concentrated about 25% of that outlay of 7.5 lakh crores is coming from highways. Now, you know that the NHA is deeply in debt, and it's also trying to sell off assets. I mean, monetize some of its assets, a large part of its assets. The railways, I was just looking at railways and the road networks, because that seems to be one of the highlights of this budget. There was a lot of talk about the capital outlay and the roads and railways and 400 Vande Bharat trains and all that. Now, the thing is, if you look at I'll talk about the road first. Now, something like 3 lakh crores is NHA's, NPAs. And these assets they're in deep trouble, and they are going to be monetized very soon. Would you invest in something before you want to monetize it? I mean, that is a terrible decision to make. If you want to lease out any asset, you don't invest in that asset before you lease it out. Especially when you know that you're going to lease it at a discount. That's one. The rail allocations, impressive as they look, they are absolutely abysmally short of what the Modi government itself had set for itself in 2019. It had this ambitious national infrastructure pipeline, which Modi unveiled in one of his Independence Day speeches. And the shortfall has been, severe in all these years. So this allocation is, I think, something like 18 to 20% of this 7.5 lakh crores. Defense takes about 20%, and I think the railways is about 18%. So the bulk of this so-called infrastructure that is coming up, that is the allocations, are highly suspect. And there's a huge shortfall, and no matter how fast you want to run these trains, you don't have the tracks to run them. Though no private player is going to come and build those tracks for you. So you have to find some way to build it, and that's not happening. These numbers look very big and nice, but they're severely way below the targets the Modi government had set for itself.
Right.
And then defense is 20%, which really is outside the scope of the general economy anyway. So so this capital outlay this is what I see is problematic with this capital outlay.
Right, quickly. I think Puneet has to leave. Puneet, before that, quickly, you have been observing these 5 states which are going to election. And you were the one who said earlier to me that, look, one has to see what kind of impact it might have on the elections. And that card is gone now. So how do you see the field now? Quickly, before you go. Yeah.
As I was saying earlier, I don't really see this budget having any kind of an impact in the poll-bound states, which is surprising because the BJP has a lot to lose in each of the 5 states. It's not on a strong wicket, irrespective of what the opinion polls and the surveys might be saying. It is heading for a lot of trouble in UP and Punjab. It's practically non-existent, but it has problems there. In Uttarakhand, it has problems. And these 3 states, there was an expectation that there will be some major announcements. I think a lot of people in UP will be extremely upset because the government had come up with this e-Shram initiative for the unorganized sector. And there was, when I was traveling across UP, one of the things that almost any politician you talked about, irrespective of the party, they would generally say that, let's wait for the budget and see how much of money they're going to put into the accounts of the e-Shram holders. And there was this expectation. There were villages after villages I went to where people were actually queuing up to get registered for e-Shram. And in fact, the economic survey also points out that the maximum registration for e-Shram has happened in Uttar Pradesh. But nothing of that sort has happened. For farmers, there is absolutely nothing. So it's almost like, mocking the farmers after the farm bills. then not delivering on the assurances that the farmers had sought when they withdrew the agitation. We heard Mr. Tiket the other day saying that they want to revive their campaign against the BJP, and they will actively ask people to vote against the BJP. So that ship has sailed for the BJP now. Even if they try and justify it by saying that, we are great for convention and we didn't want to make any announcement because the poll code is in effect and all, it'll be laughable. So I don't really see much of an impact happening on the polls.
Right. Thank you, Puneet. Thank you. One more. Thanks, Puneet. I'll come back to Professor Ramkumar. MSP question. One expected that there will be some kind of addressing that issue in the budget. Of course, everything need not be talked about, but it did talk about. They may not have officially, acknowledged the fact which the farmers basically wanted to be part of the statute, that you should recognize MSP. But they did mention in the budget speech that there will be a direct transfer, quite a substantial amount for farmers. And you said that there are something positive which you saw in the agriculture sector.
No, what I was saying was, see, the MSP question is never addressed in the budget at any point of time. The MSP is always announced by the CACP, recommended to the government, and there is a date on which the government announces it prior to the sowing season. That's how MSP is announced, which is outside the budget, number one. Number two is that any decision to convert MSP into the present A2 plus FL plus 50% to C2 plus 50% could have been attempted in the budget. It can be announced in the budget, but that again, I don't think the government is in any mood to raise the MSP by changing the methodology there. Number three is that the whole idea about legalization of MSP, there is a committee that is already sitting, which comprises of the representatives of the government and the farmers' organizations, and any decision is likely to come only on the basis of that report, and nobody really expected the budget to deal with that at any point of time. So that's with regard to the MSP. I don't think it was expected that there will be a big announcement of MSP in the budget. A lot of MSP payment is already going to the farmers via bank transfers through their bank accounts and not through cash. So I don't think that announcement is any earth-shaking as well.
Right. Let me welcome K. Raghunathan. He is MSME convener and the convener of Consortium of Indian Associations. Welcome, Mr. Raghunathan. We have a lot to hear from you. Because this was one sector which was huge distress and was expecting some kind of succor. Do you think you got it?
Thank you, Mr. Srini.
Yeah, I'm Srinivasan.
Thank you, Srini, and friends. I speak on behalf of micro entrepreneurs, self-employed, and small-scale entrepreneurs who are struggling to survive. Let me focus my angle of looking at the budget from their eyes. Now, this budget is frustrating. Disappointment is something different, but frustration is much, much different in terms of usage as a language. Why are we frustrated? The last 2 years, every one of us know that the COVID has shaken up. They did trial and error with lockdown conditions. Sometimes it was even mockery. Lockdown in the night, lockdown on Sundays. They were doing, IAS officers were doing at their whims and fancies, and the price was paid by the entrepreneurs. If I have a risk in running my business on account of my inefficiency or on account of my market conditions, then I pay the price. If I am not able to run because of the other conditions from the government, then they should compensate the loss what I make. This is an agreed principles of law. Now, what happened in the last 2 years? we identified 52 sectors which never got up in 24 months. They worked only for 6 months. Now the government, what have they cared for them? The stimulus one package which they came with in the month of June 2020 had mainly a 3 lakh crore ECGLS scheme. At that time, every one of us was telling the government that this is eligibility condition is going to kill. There will be no takers if you have this much. Relax it. Include SMA 1, include SMA 2. Don't keep 20%. Keep it at least, depending on the industry, depending on their outflow, keep it. Don't keep 29th of February as a cutoff date, because the last day of the month, all of us keep as much of cash in the bank as possible so that we have the first week expenditure to meet. Nobody listened. They went ahead. The result, the bankers at the execution level never bothered about the guarantee from the government. They insisted on the MODT charges. The money, what was supposed to have been given to the hands of the people, were adjusted towards their overdues or the moratorium dues. So literally an entrepreneur found, he went and had an additional burden on his neck with the loan, but the money wasn't in his hands. Mm-hmm. And this was continuously happening. We were fooled when the government in COVID-2 period enhanced the 3 lakhs crore to 4.5 lakhs crore, which at that point of time, the usage was not even 60% of the 3 lakh crore. Hmm. Now, today, we were again fooled, literally fooled. Yesterday, the economy survey report said the ECGLS scheme as of November 21, the usage has been 2.28 lakh crore. And they enlarged it to all sorts of people to take it. Is no more MSME loan, and anybody can take it. And the real beneficiaries were only some 60 lakhs of MSMEs. That was the figure yesterday in the survey report. Today morning, Finance Minister announces that it will get enhanced by another 50,000 and it will get extended by 1 year. Now, my dear, even if you extend it for 10 years, this loan is never going to be used by the people. Not at the condition what it has been conceived. You need to relax. So instead of doing the right thing of relaxing and giving the money in the hands of the people, these are all something which is just for the sake of saying. When the entrepreneurs are crying for their own survival, the government is today talking about skilling and reskilling. What do you do with them? And where will they find the job? Already the unemployment is so high. Where will they find the job? This is what is important today, or what we are all looking at in the budget today was, how will they save the entrepreneurs? How will they recover shocks of the people? People have lost their hopes in running. I know thousands of people. I listen to Mr. Kanagasathi. I know thousands of people who are selling their properties, closing their loans because they feel they are not confident of running their businesses. The banks are fleecing. Unfortunately, in this country, up to 2 crores, we are supposed to have loans without a guarantee or security. But unfortunately, this is a country where without security, you will get no 1 rupee loan from the government. Right. Unfortunately, during the pandemic period, a guy who had taken a gold loan was viewed in the same way with a guy who had taken a car loan for a BMW car. Unfortunately, the guy who had taken a personal loan was viewed with the same benefit as a guy who had taken a loan for buying a house. Yeah. Everybody were treated alike. And this is exactly what we were all looking at today. That today the problems were only two: save the employers and save the employees. These are the only two minimum most. And no entrepreneur wants any free money. All what we had suggested, thousands of points we have been keep suggesting, but they have no ears. They have ears only for what the people want to listen to. So what we did was, we suggested at least do us 4 things. The raw material prices are going high because of the cartel. You are not able to control it, but at least come out with a ration card system or a fair price shop for the micro entrepreneurs through the NSIC. The second, which we said, was please postpone the NPA classification for the 52 affected sector by 1 more year. The third, what we said, was allow the bankers to fund, even if it is SMA2, on the date of the lockdown period, so that people are able to exist. There is no point in talking about startups with the loss of the existing entrepreneurs. So we tried all this. We ended up getting only 4 points today. One is the skilling aspect. The other one was the 6,000 crores, which was a World Bank scheme, where you get for the next 5 years, you do, if you survive. All these are only, I don't know who advises or who ill advises, or the person who advises has no connect with what the market wants. But so today, people are frustrated with the kind of the statement. They continue to see the added benefits that go into the hands of the corporates and the tall promises which we talk about, recoveries and the GSTs. This is where we are.
I'll come back to you. I have a question for you. Before that, I think Professor Ramkumar want to leave. You can wrap up and, quickly,
Yeah, thank you. I'll just make 2 short points to wrap up my comments. First is, what this budget really misses is one sector, or rather one sphere, which is very important, which is the states. In 2021, the union government had allowed the states to have up to 4.5% fiscal deficit, which allowed them to borrow and spend in the economy. In 21-22, the overall fiscal deficit of the states, according to the economic survey, is 3.7, which is down from 4.5. And by next year, you want the states to come back to their old FRBM level of 3%. So there's going to be a huge shrinkage of expenditures at the state level, which we have to take into account when we discuss the overall fiscal stance of the budget. I expected that the budget would give some more fiscal space to the states, but unfortunately, that was not happening. The second point is the overall fiscal stance of the budget. What is the total extra expenditure that is happening in this budget? 4.6 lakh crore is the additional amount that is going to be spent in the economy compared to the present ongoing year. But this will happen only if, as the government expects, the gross tax revenue rises by rupees 5.4 lakh crores. Only if that happens will this increase in expenditure happen of about 4.6 lakh crore. I do not see that happening. I think the projections for gross tax revenue are exaggerated, and this would mean that overall revenues would be adversely affected, and this will reflect in lower expenditures than budgeted in the year of 22-23. That's what I wanted to say at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Let me quickly now introduce you Madam Amarjeet Kaur. She's General Secretary of ATEC, All India Trade Union Congress. Madam, welcome. What's your overall take on the budget?
This budget, I would say, is another bonanza to corporates. And small sector, MSME sector, the common man, the poor masses, the workers, farmers, they all are ignored. That's my first submission. And another complaint is that it's not a presentation of budget-like situation. Year after year, devaluation of the budget presentation has been done. Whenever you present a budget for 1 year. You tell what you promised last time, then you tell how much you could spend, where were the problems, and then you talk about what from where you are going to earn now and what will be your projected expenditure and all those details 1-year budget was not there. Very, very interesting language was being used, and you are presenting a budget for 25 years, which you did in 2015 also, saying that we are presenting for 25 years. Once again, in 2022, you talk of 25 years, and then you also add into century of our independence, which will happen in 2047 celebrations. So that is another way of camouflaging the things and only giving wordings to certain things. Corporate tax has been reduced from 18 to 15. You people must have discussed, but on the other hand side, from where the revenue is to come. Presently, I think 25 to 30% revenue.
Last time, this time they only removed a few. I think corporate tax was cut last time. They just some surcharges were reduced.
Additional surcharges.
Additional surcharges.
Yeah. But then they are increasing 2% cess on unblended oil. And already from oil sector, the government is earning 25 to 30% of its revenue. And with the removal of this 2% cess on unblended, taking 2% cess on unblended oil, increasing this thing, I think petrol and diesel expenses are going to rise in the coming days. And this is another way of taking money from the common man and shifting it to the upward side instead of trickling down, trickling up happening over there. I also feel very bad that whatever we presented before Finance Minister.
Sorry, the logic given by the Finance Minister was that they want to have more blended oil. That's the reason. They want more. That's the reason it has been done. Okay, please.
Yeah, I know. I Srinivasanji, I fully sat through all the 92 minutes of her speech. So I know all the arguments which she was giving. And that's why I'm countering it. The new names and new slogans come up. For example, earlier national monetization pipeline, and now a new world has come to push that national monetization pipeline. And today it was being talked 7-engine Gati Shakti. So it's part of NMP, and then in the name of 7-engine Gati Shakti, you are going to push and pursue that thing. Then for common man, what are you going to do about railways and giving them services and better and running their trains appropriately? Instead of that, only Vande Bharat thing is added, 400 trains. More emphasis was given on that, and they have not answered about what happened to the Kisan train, which they talked about with big fanfare. And today they have talked of one station, one product. Every time the previous smart cities, skill India, there were different kinds of slogans. None of them, there is no reply to that. What all happened to all that? So they have not given their track record, what they have done. They have not projected how they are going to collect funds. And as I understand, 39.5 lakh crore budget, when they said, out of that 22.8 lakh crore is loans only, credits only. In the real sense, how much money they are going to generate is you can minus out of 39.5, 22.8 something. Whatever submissions we made before Finance Minister, none of the trade union concerns have been really taken into. And on education, we know digital device has taken away education from our children, especially the poor family children. Instead of addressing that, you are talking only of TV to be given to them, and you are saying mobile phone se kar lenge, TV will be given, and how this education will be given to those children. Now, if the government says that we have registered 10 crore in Ayushman Bharat. In Ayushman Bharat, when you register 10 crore into 5, the family members, it becomes 50 crore. And when you register in Ayushman, you say there should be no pakka house, there should be no electricity, there should be no television, then only that family can register. So you can understand, you are talking of the families where there is no pakka house, there is no electricity, there is no TV in their house. And then you are talking that all digital education you will be giving to them. They were trying to project as if digital university is a very new idea. In Kerala, you already have digital university. And what they have done on health budget has been reduced. We do not know how much health budget we need actually in future to improve upon. The health budget has been introduced, and from 37,130 crore, they have brought it to 34,947. The budget of Manrega has been reduced, which has been somehow being a lifeline for our poor people during COVID period. And they are reducing the budget. And they are talking in fanfare that their budget is for the people. But the people are missing from there. Then a big lie was told in the parliament. They said 16.3 million farmers benefited through MSP last year. But the fact is only 12.4 million people, as FCI reported, 12.4 million were taken, not 12.4 million farmers were covered, not 16.3 million. So jugglery can be done in different ways, and middle classes who were looking for income tax slab to go up, but they have been left high and dry. So there is, I would say, there is nothing for poor masses. 80% population which is in dire need of the government speaking for them, doing something for them. Out of them, about 23-24 crore people are below poverty line at present. So where does this budget reflect the common man's concern? It doesn't reflect the common man's
I'll come back to you, madam. I think there are lots of points. Some of these we discussed earlier before you came. Quickly, let me go to others who have been waiting. I think I'll just introduce, we have in the room Dipesh Raga, who's a personal finance investment advisor. Just a minute, Dipesh, I'll come to you. I think Sridhar wants to say something.
Yeah. See, I just wanted to pick up a couple of points from what Mr. Raghunathan was saying. See, this as of now, although the economic survey and those in government seem to be suggesting that we are in recovery mode, all the evidence seems to suggest that there is a duality in this entire process. That everybody is not in the same boat. A lot of people are outside this boat and they are sinking. So, I mean, that is a real problem which is not addressed in the budget. You see, it's not just the MSME, it is a lot of other things, like employment is not picking up either in the rural areas or in the cities. And so this duality needs to be addressed. Otherwise, you run the risk of not having a broad-based recovery which is sustainable and durable. So what will happen is that if that is not the case, then all your projections, your revenue projections, everything goes out of the window. What Ram Kumar was referring to about the ambitious tax projections that have been made, everything depends on those projections materializing.
Right. So, Sridhar, I'll come back to you. Let me quickly, I think Raghunathan want to say something. He wants to leave. Before that, I just have one question for you. See, the exports have done really well, Raghunath, and a lot of contribution come from MSMEs. Of course, you said you're talking about micro. But, there is a contribution which has come from them. So exports actually have done better. How do you explain that? And also another question, if you could quickly take, as quickly as you can answer. Ancillary units have been very badly hit, especially automobile and other things, because much of your, manufacturing actually a big share, 25% comes out of that. So about that sector, if you have anything to say, these 2 points.
As far as export is concerned, there was a stagnation due to non-availability of containers for a while. A lot of goods got stagnated. Then it got eased out. And the year end was coming. Year end was December 31st. So the year end was coming. There was a heavy rush of pushing out the consignments. So it was something which has been happening, which was happening in 3 months, what it normally happens in 6 months for that matter.
Right.
So we need to sustain and see the Q1 of this financial year, which was January, February, March, and the Q2 of this financial year in a global sense. How it happens. That's the first point. Then the second point which you asked me about the ancillary unit. See, there are a couple of units which got almost choked. We did a survey which had a response with over about 1 lakh units across the country, and 40% of the units are not able to function for various reasons. It has got nothing to do with just only the financial problems or labor problems and things like that, but 40% were not able to function. And 82% were not able to make profit during the last 2 financial years. 80%. So this is a significant factor to learn from. And it is not ancillary unit alone. It is the feeder units, the service industries, and the service providers, the installers for that matter, who are not able to move into the field. And then it was also component manufacturers. They were all hit. You come to Coimbatore, you will find the foundry industries took a big beating. Go to Sivagasi and you will find the whole sorts of industries had a big problem in survival, printing industries. Right. Sivagasi is known for printing. So there is a different problems and different kind of things which we went through. Some survived, some who could have the wherewithal to hold on for a while survived, and some are not able to survive. That's why I always said to the government, give the entrepreneur a choice to choose from. You want to close, you need a help, or you're doing well and you need more support in some other form. If you want to close, give them a honorable exit. Let him go. Don't drag the picture, let him go. And give him a one-time settlement, get him out. Second, if you have a problem, let us understand your problem and give a solution to your problem and make you survive. If you are doing well and you want to modernize, you want to digitalize, you want to go into expansion, you need funding for that, let's have a long-term funding for that. Unless you do these 3 segments through the banker, because the banker knows the relationship with the account holder. It is not just the sector that matters. It is the entrepreneur that matters, because most of the time the entrepreneur goes to the bank manager at 5 o'clock in the evening, drops a check, collects the cash, and the check will be dated probably 4 days from then, 5 days from then. It's an adjustment which happens. The relationship banking is what it's called as. This is my take on this.
Right. Thank you very much. I think you really gave a lot of insight on what actually happens on the ground, because largely the budget is seen from perhaps a sky high level, and you are actually bringing to the ground what actually happens on the ground. Thank you very much, Raghunath.
Thanks to everybody. Thank you.
So I have to quickly go to our personal finance advisor, Raghav. Do you think, is there anything for you in the budget? Because the speech I heard, there was nothing much. We were expecting at least something they will say. So how do you react to this?
Yeah, so
print, is there anything there?
Yeah, usual sops. So unless you are a crypto investor or a trader, there are no real fireworks in the budget. No change in tax slabs or income tax rates. There was a lot of clamor for increasing Section 80C, the investment limit. That did not happen. So it remains unchanged at 1.5 lakhs. Minor changes here and there. So there is the provision for updated filing, revising your returns. So earlier you could do it with up to 5 months from filing of your ITR. Now you can do it. You can revise your returns by within 2 years from the end of the assessment year. So a bit of convenience. It reduces friction in the tax filing process, friction between the common man and the taxman. There was a bit of parity issue between central government employees and state government employees with respect to interest contributions. So government contribution to central government employees were exempt from tax up to 14% of the basic. For state government, it was only up to 10%. Now that parity, so now things have been brought at par.
Yeah.
Even state government employees will get the tax benefit of up to 14% of their basic salary for employer contribution. Apart from that, not much. There is a bit of change in terms of surcharge for long-term capital gains. For any assets other than listed equity or mutual funds, the capital, the surcharge was capped at 15%, but for other assets, it could go up to as high as 28%. The surcharge was kept at 15% for listed assets.
Yeah.
For other assets, it could go up to as high as 37%, increasing the effective tax liability for the investors. Now, everything has been brought at par, irrespective of what kind of capital asset you own. The surcharge will be capped at 15%. So, minor relief for the investor. I think startup community might like it a bit, but yes, that's pretty much it. And yes, there is change with respect to the crypto taxation.
So how do you look at the thing, what they're calling as virtual currency, the steep asset, virtual asset, 30%.
Virtual digital asset.
Yeah, virtual asset. That's a new definition which they are given.
Right. So I think it's a mix of
before just the other thing is about crypto, which means there is now a recognition of crypto as a currency. So the kind of implication it has, if you can just add to what Srini was asking.
Right. So the taxation is slightly onerous, and I think it is along expected lines. Government wanted to make things slightly complicated, or rather discourage investors from investing in cryptos. So if you have any kind of gain from the sale of crypto assets, you'll have to pay flat 30% tax, irrespective of your tax bracket, right? So you might find 5% tax bracket, 10% tax bracket. You have to pay tax at 30%, which I'm sure a number of crypto investors will not like. Plus, there is a TDS of 1% on each and every sale. So let's say you might have bought an asset for 1.5 lakhs, its value drops down to 1 lakh, and then you sell it. Even though you are selling it at a loss, there will be a TDS at 1% on the consideration amount. And if you are a frequent trader, that can be a big problem, right? Because a lot of your money will be stuck with the government as TDS. Of course, you can claim it back later when you file your ITR, but that is a problem. And the bad news does not end here. You cannot set off losses from crypto assets against any other kind of income, including capital assets. So you might have, let's say, booked a loss of 2 lakhs in buy and sale of Bitcoin, and you have let's say a gain of 2 lakhs from sale of stocks. So you cannot use this loss to set off that gain in crypto assets, which is a problem, right? So essentially, it's not a capital asset. It's, as Sir said, it's a virtual digital asset. It's a different kind of classification that the government has given, and it is taxing it, perhaps a bit more aggressively than it would tax any other capital asset. We know that. So in this case, there is no definition of short-term or long-term capital gains.
They seem to be kind of discouraging it.
Right.
But on the other hand, the RBI is going to introduce digital currency. I think the date has also been announced, 23, I think, 2020. What is the meaning of that? I mean,
so government does not want to, I think government doesn't want to be left out with the entire, revolution or believe the changes which are happening around blockchain technology. So they are going to launch a digital currency which will be based on blockchain. But yes, we need to see the true impact, how it works. We have capital account convertibility, how this really helps. We really have to see. We can't just settlements cannot happen to be just like that unless the RBI gives the permission. So all those things will have to be seen. So government seems okay with the blockchain technology per se. In fact, it does not want to be left behind. The problem with government or the government just wants to track what's happening in the crypto space, right? So if somebody is transferring or buying or selling cryptos, they want to track who's doing that, have the adequate taxes being paid. So those things are there. And of course, since they want to discourage everything, the laws that they have brought are slightly onerous for the crypto investor. For instance, there is no carry forward of losses. So if let's say you book loss of 5 lakhs in crypto assets, right? You cannot carry it forward. So the loss is gone. So if you had booked a loss in, let's say, your stocks or equity funds, the only solace that you would have that at some point in time you would use this to reduce your capital gains tax liability. In cryptos, you can do this within that financial year, but beyond that, not allowed, right? So again, a bit onerous, something investors will not like. Plus, simple gift. So let's say if I were to transfer a Bitcoin to a relative, the relative will have to pay tax at 30%, right? So like,
I think from every which way they have kind of
right.
Yeah.
But I think it's good. It's good that they are taxing it. I mean, government must get the taxation. Government must be able to track, and in introducing taxation, introducing TDS helps them track crypto transactions, because I think that's the primary worry of the government. They don't want that this is used for illicit activities like money laundering.
Right. Thank you. I have one quick question. Before that, let me quickly introduce Purnima Verma. She's professor at Center for Management and Agriculture in IIM Ahmedabad. Welcome. I'll come back to you. I think one last question for you, Deepesh. Unless Sridhar, you want to ask something?
I have a counter on the position on this crypto, because the crypto is very different in the sense that it is an asset, but it is also a currency. Okay, so if it plays the role of a currency, it is interfering with the sovereign right of a nation state to determine a currency. What goes, it's fiat, and so if you take that perspective, that is interfering with monetary policy and everything else, exchange rates, and it could play havoc with a whole lot of other policy instruments of the government, which are legitimately belong, to a sovereign anywhere in the world. So most governments have taken this approach, trying to neutralize it in this way or some other way, and you have a high tax rate on horse racing or betting, and that's the nature of the thing. Right. But this has an additional dimension. It's not just an asset. That's the point.
Right. Thanks, Sridhar. Quickly, one last thing. I think some viewers would certainly want to know, Deepesh. So, what should be your advice in this budget? After that, will your thing change, or you will continue to say, whatever advice you've been giving in the past? Look across various asset classes. Don't put all eggs in one basket. Those kind of generalities, or do you have anything specific to say?
So those golden rules of financial planning or personal finance investments hold. They don't go anywhere. There's one more point. Even though government decide to tax it, we still have to await clarity that will come when the crypto bill is passed by the Parliament of India, right? So even though the chances of an outright ban on crypto assets should be lower, I think those have gone down drastically after these announcements in the budget. But still, there are levers that government has, and we can't still rule out that cryptos might still be banned outright in India. So we don't know. But yes, if you have to invest in cryptos, you keep in mind all these aspects and stick with one or two prominent crypto assets.
Right. Thank you very much. Quickly, Purnima, if you want to make your opening remarks on the budget. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today with all of you. I work on agriculture. So I had a quick look at what are the kind of aspects which are relevant to the farm sector. In fact, in my opinion, there is a sheer neglect of rural sector, small and marginal farmers. Although the claim is that the budget is for farmers and for improving the productivity and farm income. And also there is a remark that there is going to be huge public investment. But I think I'm a bit skeptical about all this. So I'll go one by one. So for example, if you look at the infrastructure development, the infrastructure development has focused mainly on the urban segment, like development of metros and airports and even national highways, with no attention being paid to the development of the rural roads, rural electrification. So there is nothing for the rural sector and for the small and marginal farmers. So whatever the budget is actually claiming is for helping the large agri-business companies, and even the supply chain, strengthening of the supply chain through maybe the railways or port and cargoes and things like that. I mean, I don't think it's really going to help the small and marginal farmers. So the infrastructural aspect has kind of completely undermined small and marginal farmers and the development in the rural sector. So there are lots of issues that one need to look at when you want to address the issues of the farmers, small marginal farmers. And for example, even the National Commission on Farmers had suggested that we need 41,000 of markets to make sure that the farmers will get some minimum access to the market. So that is kind of a promise which is long forgotten. And what we have is a very small share of percentage of what is actually required. And then farmers should be having 5 kilometer, markets within the 5 kilometer. I make visits to the villages very frequently. Recently I went to Maharashtra and a couple of other villages in Karnataka. So we know that farmers travel 100 kilometers, 40, 50 to 100 kilometers to sell their product in an APMC market. So the farm bills and the controversies, we all know about it. But at the same time, there is nothing to strengthen the rural infrastructure, marketing facilities of the farmers. The focus is mainly on the urban and then to help the agribusiness companies. So this is my quick understanding when I had a look at the budget. Right. And another thing, even when it comes to the procurement, although in the last year, I think the procurement was done. I think the amount was even more than what is in this year. This year, it's only 2.37 lakh crore, whereas it was 2.48 lakh crore in the previous year, in the previous budget. And then again, the coverage of farmers, if you look at the coverage of farmers, that has also gone down from 197 to 163 lakh farmers. And we all know, and even the procurement, this is mainly to keep one section of the farmers from the northern side, Haryana and Punjab, to keep happy in the midst of the protest. And we all know why. It may have a political reasons to do this. But at the same time, there have been, plenty of issues in the agricultural sector. Right. None of it.
I'm sure you can't, we can't cover all that. I'll come back to you. I have a very special guest. Let me quickly welcome him. Mr. Thomas Isaac, CPM leader and former Finance Minister of Kerala. We have actually, we'll extend the time now because I think there are so many reactions that it's difficult to accommodate. So we'll extend the time now. Madam Kaur, I'll come back to you. Let me just welcome Thomas Isaac and ask him, how do you see the budget directionally? Where do you see heading?
We have three major problems in the country. The economic stagnation. The GDP growth would be the same level would be the same as the pre-COVID would be at best. Second, you have facing inflation. Third, you have a situation of widening of inequality. Now I look at how does the budget address economic challenges. My simple take is this. One, the overall increase in government expenditure is just is lower than, say, inflation rate. In real terms, there is no increase in the budget with overall expenditure. That cannot be a stimulus. Second, inflation, it has been ignored. They're comforted by the thought that consumer price movement is much lower than the wholesale price movement and so on and so forth. They could have reduced or brought back the taxes to most of the petroleum products that were kept the prices in check. Third, inclusive development. So much is talked in the budget. There is nothing virtually there. What about taxing the, say, extreme wealthy persons? But look at the expenditure on the ordinary people. Say agriculture, Purnima was talking about agriculture. Well, the agricultural and allied sectors plus fertilizer plus food subsidy, these three items total last revised expenditure 5.7 lakh rupees. allocation for this year is 4.6 lakh rupees. If you take, for example, agriculture allied sectors alone, the increase is just 2.5% in nominal terms. Now, if you take, say, flagship poverty anti-poverty program, say MGNRES,
25% cut.
Something like 1 lakh crores spent last year, and this year allocation is 73,000. The 6 major core programs which are taken together, expenditure last year was 1.21 lakh crore rupees, and this year is less than 1 lakh crore rupees. Rural development, expenditure was 2.07 lakh crore rupees. Now is the same level is kept. And Anganwadi is at the same level. And of all of a surprise, total surprise, health sector doesn't get a pie more than spent last year. Now this is totally, I mean, you talk about inclusive development, then you ensure the poor are squeezed. For what? Only thing distinctive about this budget is the last 3 years, the capital expenditure in real terms has been significantly going up. This year also, has crossed 10 lakh crore rupees. Now, this is mobilized by squeezing the expenditure on the poor and ordinary people. This is the real nature of the budget. And the whole hope of the finance minister is that she speaks in the initial parts of the budget. You have this huge capital in public capital investment. It will crowd in private investment, and that will bring in complementary things, and virtuous cycle of growth will take place. And we all will march towards the 100th anniversary of independence. And that's something is like the plot which is there in the budget. Yeah, that's my take on the budget.
Right. Thank you for that. I have a question on that. You see, increasing capital expenditure, which is actually nearly gone up by 25%. I think there is a cut in subsidy, massive cut, I think 27% or something. But, isn't it, in a way, capital expenditure, if it actually results in real asset creation, you would agree, isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, it's absolutely, I would agree with that.
Because capital expenditure. So you have a problem with the way it is being funded.
No, that's right. Look, here I am against squeezing the people to finance capital expenditure. Now, I am not an accountant, I'm a political economist. Expenditure in human capital, I would consider it capital. That should be taken out of the revenue account. And then it will be a very different picture, you see. Anyway, now, say, you could borrow, let the revenue, fiscal deficit go up. What's wrong with that? If you are investing in capital goods, investment, then it doesn't matter whether you are borrowing, a private sector is borrowing, macroeconomic impact is same. It's only budget accountancy purpose. You are saying that it is wrong to borrow and spend on.
Yeah, I think the link has got frozen. Yeah. Hello. I think the link has got frozen. So,
can I make a point on this?
Yeah, Sridhar. I think the link got frozen, so you can speak. Yeah.
This point about about these expenditures on various things that segments of activity, crucial economic activity that is especially important in the pandemic. You see, I just want to speak about education, for instance. We're talking about human capital, and children, millions of Indian children have lost 2 years of their lives. Now, there is every person who understands education, you talk to teachers, you talk to parents, you talk to children, and they tell you that they can't just go back to school and continue as if nothing has happened. We the education, the budget is allocation for both school level education as well as higher education is practically frozen at that same level, which indicates that the government does not even realize that they have a problem. There is a huge problem. Because if a child in class 5 has been shut out of school in 2 years of the pandemic, he can't come to class 7 and pick up as if nothing has happened. And so you have to proactively engage with this very special situation that has arisen as a result of the pandemic and do something about it. That you have to have remedial measures in schools, for which you need funding, you need more teachers, you need a whole lot of other things, for which you need spending. And that is, you don't see it in the budget.
Right. Right. Quickly, Dr. Madam Kaur, I want to ask you one thing. You see, a pandemic has really caused a lot of stress, especially unorganized labor, migrant laborers, and there's a huge displacement. Do you see? Of course, on the face of it, the budget speech didn't talk about it. Actually, there wasn't a mention about it. But do you see in any way help could be given to those sections?
Yes, we had raised it even during pandemic. We were saying that the families whom you are giving free rations, you understand those families are those who do not have any livelihood, and they lost their livelihood during pandemic, self-employment or jobs, many of them lost it. And we know from the ground reality that vast majority of people did not get back their jobs, and those who could join back their jobs, they have been given depressed wage, not the same wage. They were told that you can join only if you are ready to take less. For example, from Gurgaon area, if anybody was earning 20,000 before COVID, when they left when they migrated to their villages back when the industry was closed, on return, they are being told you take 10,000 or 12,000, then only we'll keep you back. So there is job loss also, and there is no creation of new jobs also. And the workers have suffered very, very badly. We had demanded 7,500 rupees to each family, the very poor families, those who are non-income tax paying families. The government should pay for 2-3 years at least for them to have something in their hands. We were not saying individuals, we were saying per family, but the government did not listen to that. We also said stop the linkages of ration giving with Aadhaar card or the ration card. You make it universal and make it possible for them to access it. That also we said it was not done. Similarly, we told them to give some better package, those who are for self-employment for them, but nothing has come out at that level. So you can understand if even if those who are owning businesses at the micro, medium and small level, if they are unsatisfied that they cannot do anything, so what to talk of those who don't have even assets. So employment is a serious issue, job losses is a serious issue, depressed wage is a serious issue, and there we find that contractorization, casualization, which is becoming a norm, fixed term employment, which is becoming a norm now, slowly and slowly, with the kind of pushing through the labor law reforms are happening. So the working class is on the receiving end, and this budget doesn't show any light as far as they are concerned. It seems real India is somewhere else and virtual India is being talked about, and no lessons have been learned from the inequality report, which was placed the other day in World Economic Forum. And India has also been given a little space over there among all those countries who were there. About 1.5% space we got there. Some sentences about India also, but they tell a very, very gory picture, very bad picture as far as inequality in India is concerned. So vast majority of of the population which is still depending on free rations or the PDS system are the people who do not have sufficient money for buying services. So education is their need, health is their need, basic civic amenities are needed. They don't have pakka roof on their head. They are the people, and then their hands do not have the work they want to. So the concept of wages, we find through this labor code codification which is happening, there rather the wage definition is being changed, and floor level wage is being talked about. Without having money in the pockets of people, how you are going to revive economy? I can't understand this logic of big talks which were being made by the finance minister, but not looking down what is happening at the grassroots level. So at the grassroots level, highly skilled, semi-skilled boys and girls, they also went for Manrega, we should understand. So MG Narega, which was being looked at as a stupid scheme, has actually, the people had fallen back on it when in crisis situation. So the budgets of Manrega should increase, urban employment guarantee scheme should come, and then some kind of cash transfer for a year or 2 years, that should happen. Lockdown wages government can pay. If those small employers cannot pay, something should go to them. So in this ground reality, I think the workers' agenda has been lost in this budget. As we have been seeing for last few budgets, it is happening. So we are an aggrieved party, I should say, from the, as far as working class point of view is concerned, and especially the informal economy, which is increasing. Talk is of formalizing informal economy. The truth of the matter is informalization of economy is happening. And everywhere, wherever you saw digitalization or online things, making things virtual, you will be freeing those places from the human beings. So you are saying human free development. So human free development means more of job loss are in future in store. So already those who are suffering, so unemployment will be a serious issue.
Right. Thank you very much. I think certainly this perspective is important. I think now your wish list has hardly gone through.
Srinivasanji, only I add one thing. All of us were observing 26 January, our Republic Day. And what were our students and youth doing on the railway tracks in Bihar and in UP and in different places? They were asking for employment. So those sanctioned posts are not being filled. New employments are not coming. More than 50% are unemployed between the age group of 15 and 25. If we do not address youth, if we do not invest in employment generation, then where we are leading this country to?
Thank you very much.
We are seriously worried about.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. I have a quick question to Mr. Isaac. You've been Finance Minister of important state, Kerala. How do you see the budget as far as the federal structure is concerned? Because that's one issue which we are very keen. We constantly focus on this issue. How do you see this budget fitting in that?
One, there are a whole lot of problems to be sorted out on GST. I'm suspecting she would give some cue of what central government is thinking. I think GST Council would be a better place to discuss that. Second, Government of India is adopting the stance of having conditional borrowing. Even this time now, part of the public additional borrowing that's allowed for state is conditional upon certain reforms in the electricity sector. I'm totally against that. That is one big issue. And third, now there is no planning commission. Earlier, the state could at least go discuss, there are separate discussions these states in this NDC council for deciding something about 20% of the total central budget. Now the Union Finance Ministry decides, they decide, it can be the norm, they decide the interstate distribution of it. Too much concentration of power, and there is no democratic transfer procedure for this whole central sector schemes and centrally sponsored schemes. So these are some of the major issues.
How do you see the growth of GST? You've been in the GST Council.
Well, GST growth, you see, now they have been taking very ad hoc decisions regarding the rates. Rates were discussed after such, I don't know, about 6 months of discussion. Each rate looked at the pre-GST rate and post-GST and I mean, everything. And then all of a sudden in a meeting, unfortunately, I wasn't there, the whole structure was changed. So you have today inverted rate structure. You have now serious problem. It's not revenue neutral anymore, and so on. So a serious rethinking on the structure and rates of the GST will have to take place. But what I want to say, impress, is that now this present budget emphasizes capital expenditure. Now states undertake more capital expenditure than the central government. Yeah, that's a fact. If you look at the share of states in the capital expenditure, there must be much greater dialogue between center and states. See. Now there is a huge grant component of the center, which is really capital expenditure, which is given to states. But that's where the effective revenue deficit rate calculations come in. This is housing versus capital expenditure. Well, there is no federal system for doing that. It's arbitrarily done. All this must be discussed. That I think now that central government is saying capital expenditure is very important, they're going to take that path very well. There need to be a serious dialogue with the states on this.
Right. Yeah. Sridhar, you have any question?
Yes. Yeah. Coming. Sridhar, you have to unmute. Sridhar.
I think muted. Yeah.
Yeah. So the issue of GST compensation is still hanging fire, and meanwhile, states are increasingly under pressure. So, I mean, this is really going to come to a boil very soon.
Yes. See, I do not understand why Center should object to it. This GST compensation does not come from Center's kitty. It's a special amount collected on the decision of the GST Council. On what? On demerit goods mostly, or very high value added commodities. Mass of population is not bothered about it. And that continuance of that would give such a degree of comfort to the states. You're assured of a minimum increase in your revenue. May the states go out of it. Now, I don't know why they take this stand on this. This I think is going to be a critical issue on which there is going to be serious confrontation. This cutting across the political spectrum, for BJP, non-BJP, every state wants it. And I hope there will be good sense. I thought now, Finance Minister may use this budget session to give an indication of Center. Center cannot take decision on that, agree. But an indication of what Center is thinking. And that would have been very accommodative to the states. And that unfortunately didn't happen.
Yeah, I think also states have a lot of accumulated revenue which need to receive from the center.
Yeah, there is. In fact, part of the revenue is taken as a loan and so on. It was done slightly bad taste. Yeah. This GST has been evolved through such mutual consultation, give and take. Suddenly you have a situation where center is adopting a very stringent stand with a lot of fight going on. So much so, this federal institution has become now for the first time in the last 3-4 years politically divided, which never was the case earlier.
Okay. I have a final question for you. You have the budget before you. The finance minister has spelled out what he wants to do. What would be your political action on this? You have listed out all the issues. How would your party and you tackle it? What would be your
one CPM position is very clear. The government of Kerala is for state rights. Have been taking that position every national level. I think now DMK, Tamil Nadu, The Finance Minister, Chief Minister has been very vocal. I hope some of these issues, there will be a common stand taken together by the states. Earlier, the states used to meet in seminars and consultations organized by states themselves. Of course, BJP used to keep out of it, but they would also be invited. It's not a kind of partisan exercise. I think that kind of mutual consultation will have to start. And some of the issues, common positions can be developed. For example, I'll mention that and stop. I got another TV station waiting. That is now this privatization. The land has been acquired by the state on their money using their power and given to the public sector, central public sector. Now can center take a unilateral stand that they will do with the land? They will monetize and take the money. Now that's not acceptable. And I'm very happy that Tamil Nadu Finance Minister has taken open stand on this in the last GST Council meeting. I think that's a good start. This is the important point. And I think on this point, there would be a great consensus of all the states.
Yeah.
Now is their property, they want to privatize, struggle against this political struggle to be fought. But state as a whole, you privatize, you give the land. Kerala has been saying, we want this land and give to you. Now, if you want to sell, give us sell. It's the first choice of purchasing. We are willing to purchase airport in Trivandrum or other factories. I tell you, for example, newsprint factory in Kerala, we paid down payment of 250 crores and some took over some of the debt. But you know, you got 700 acres of land here for 250 crores. The land is such a precious commodity in Kerala. So I think this is an issue on which there's going to be a major confrontation in the making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly introduce Elangovan, Vice President of Dakshin Railway Employees Union. I thank him for waiting patiently. So before that, I think Purnima, if you want to conclude your remarks, how do you?
Yeah, in fact, I would like to add one point to the public expenditure remark that you made earlier. I fully agree that public investment is key to agricultural productivity. I mean, public investment for the agricultural sector is very, very important, and that's the only way the agricultural productivity can be improved. But if you look at the increase in public expenditure, I mean, that's again, of course, there has been an increase. One has to account for the inflation and everything. But then one thing is we had a very high levels of public investment and expenditure prior to 1990s. And it is only after 1990s the public expenditure started to decline. Not only in India, that was the phenomenon in many developing countries. And in most developing countries, by mid-2000, there is a revival of the public expenditure. But then when you have a close look at the public expenditure, I mean, we can see that it is the revenue component which is actually increasing. So there is a very small amount of increase in the capital expenditure. So that is one thing. So this is something kind of, I think what we are seeing is only a marginal revival in the public investment. I mean, ideally the public investment, the levels were much higher prior to 1990s. So that's one thing. And there is a lot of debate and discussions that's going on that what is more important for the agricultural development, if there is a public expenditure for the agricultural sector per se, what is more important for the development, whether it is development and poverty eradication and agricultural growth, whether it is public investment or subsidies. So that's a debate which is going on for a while. But then at the same time, there is no justification for the reduction in some subsidies on a random basis. And for example, the fertilizer subsidy, there is a cut in fertilizer subsidy by 25%, especially when the fertilizer prices are actually increasing. So that can have an impact because there are studies, and one of my colleagues, he's a CSCP chairperson, we did a study on fertilizer subsidy, and the study is actually saying that fertilizer subsidy is very important for the small and marginal farmers' farm income, and if you reduce it or remove it, it will have an adverse impact on the farm income. So when we have this kind of situations and cutting the fertilizer subsidy, I don't think, I mean, a small increase, a marginal increase in the public expenditure can justify this reduction. So I think subsidy, obviously one has to look at it in a very judicious manner. Probably one has to see what is more important and what is really relevant for the agricultural sector. So I just thought I will add that point. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Elangovan, you've been very patient. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's really, they've been trying to do something with the railways. 150 pairs of trains were to be, handed over. So what happened? And how do you think this budget has addressed the railways?
Really, good evening to you all. The budget, they announce public investment to pump private investment. It is their policy, they say. In practice, is it happening? I will cite the railway example. You say, see, the motto of railway has been to run safe, fast train services at affordable cost. The state of Indian railways is very bad. Goods, it was 84%. The national goods transport was carried by railways 84%. Now it is only 28%. Passenger segment, it was 79%, it is only 12% now. Goods trains, you'll be shocked to know, goods trains run at a speed of 25 kilometers per hour. And passenger trains run at a average speed of 50 kilometers per hour. So traffic saturation is there. 55% of traffic runs in 20% of network. Some routes are 100 and 150%, 100 to 150% occupation is there. Therefore, the need of the railway is to meet the demand of the to meet the future demand and to strengthen the existing railways. You need expansion of network. You need doubling. You need quadrupling. You need dedicated freight, dedicated passenger lines. All these we need. And safety also we have to concentrate. See, for example, 4,500 kilometers of track becomes overaged every year, but we renew only 3,000 to 2,500 kilometers, and 200 stations signals become overaged. We renew only 100. And CAG says we need 1,14,000 crores to renew the existing assets to make the safety standards, at least existing network, to be safe. So,
Mr. Elangovan, these are the macro positions which you are revealing.
Yes.
Problems of the railways.
Yes,
what I want to know is how much of these today you think have been addressed in today's
budget.
For instance, they said that we are going to offer to private sector 150 trains. I don't think it has happened. Stations, 400 stations, they said. Probably one station that Bhopal, Habibganj has happened.
Yes.
But so what does, if you've gone through the railway papers, do you think that there is any course correction they're planning to do, or are they going to go ahead? What is your impression?
In the national, they want in the national monetization pipeline, they have declared that the out of 13.69 lakh crore for national infrastructure pipeline, out of 111 lakh crores for the national infrastructure pipeline, 13.69 lakh was for railways, and out of which railway, the national monetization pipeline intended to mobilize 6 lakh crore through national monetization. And for railways, it was only 1,52,000 crores. That is 25% of 6 lakh crores. And out of 1,52,000 crores, they wanted to mobilize or get the lease amount through privatization of 90 trains. You said 150 trains. It was earlier they announced 150 trains will be privatized. In the 12 clusters, Chennai is one of the clusters. And for this, tender was opened on 23rd July 2021, but there was no bidders for 9 clusters. Only for 3 clusters there were bidders. One is Mumbai 2, another is Delhi 1 and 2. And it was IRCTC which had applied for two stations. Another is Mega Engineering Company. And this Mega Engineering Company, revenue share, they wanted to give only, if they earn 100 rupees, they will give only 54 paisa. Therefore, the 154 trains tender, all the tender has been discharged, cancelled as per the parliament reply. So that, but now they say they will go in the asset monetization, they will go for 90 trains. How they arrive at this 90 figures? They say 60% of the 150. 60% of the 150 will be 90 trains. So they are going to privatize 90 trains. Why they are not coming? Because they don't want revenue share to be given to the railways. So they want free running. If it is freight services, they will come. Without profit, they are not ready to come. Right. And out of the 400 stations they announced, 400 stations, 76,000 crores will be mobilized, they say. Right. But actually what happened, earlier in 2014, they announced 400 A1, A-class stations. But what happened, then they reduced it to 50 stations. Then they reduced to 27 stations. For 27 stations, they floated tender. But only Habibganj, so far, will be done. So, because the private don't want to come to railway station without any profit. So this is the position. So,
thanks,
now,
we are actually running out of time. So thank you very much for your perspective on this. I'll wrap up quickly with one comment from Sridhar. We really thank you very much for joining us and giving your valuable time, but we're really running out of time now. Sridhar, yeah. You're muted.
Yeah. The thing is that this whole thing, when you say you want to privatize, the justification is that it will bring additionality of investment. In the case of this running of these trains, you have such stringent rules that the railways will not run trains. See, the times, the allocation of these trains are such that these are slots at which the railways are already running trains. Yeah. In order to accommodate these private investors, they are withdrawing those services and given them an assurance that they can fix fares, whatever they like. They will not run trains in a time band of, the time, suppose the train leaves at 6 o'clock, within 1 or 2 hours on either side, you will not run a train of your own. So despite all these conditions, they are not investing. So it's really the other thing. The other thing I wanted to quickly make the point was about the business of this 400 Vande Bharat trains.
Right.
It's really a colossal joke because this country produced those trains in 2019 at the ICF in Chennai. And since then, ICF and other coach factories have been stopped from producing these train sets. These train sets have been running as Vande Bharat trains for 3 years without any hitch at all. Mr. Modi himself inaugurated this train before the elections of 2019 and then put this in cold storage. So this, it just doesn't make any sense. 400 trains, where is it going to come from? Obviously, you don't have the infrastructure to produce those trains in India, although you have the capability, the know-how and the expertise. So you're going to buy them.
Yeah.
Atmanirbharta.
Right. Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dakshin. Thanks, Mr. Elangovan, for being with us. I think we'll do one more show on this because there are a lot of unanswered questions and more things will reveal out of this budget in the next few days as people further discuss